It was April 1st, 2001. I was at home watching TV when I heard a big bang on my back door. I didn't know who or what it was. Thought it was a raccoon or something, so I kept watching TV. I will never forget what I heard. Someone whispered, "I am coming for you." I turned to see who it was, but no one was there. I went outside and yelled, "Who's there?" I went back inside, and then I saw it. It was a man with a white rabbit mask holding a kitchen knife. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and turned on the light. The guy took off his mask, and it was my friend, Fred. I was relieved, and he yelled, "April Fools!" I asked how he managed to get so far when he whispered in my ear. He looked confused. To my surprise, he said, "I never whispered in your ear." That's when I knew something was in my house. I told Fred to hide and call the cops. When the cops got there, they saw a man with long black hair robbing stuff from my house. He had a pistol and some pocket knives. The cops told me he had broke out of prison a couple days before the incident.
Back then, my brother and I used to play with a lot of guns, especially water guns. One night, we got our flashlights and pretended we were the police. It was around 10 p.m. We were in the backyard with my brother's friend playing when we saw a tall black guy. We were just staring at him. I don't know who he was or why he was there. Then he suddenly said, "Hey, can I play with you?" "Bitch, please," my brother said. Then the tall guy seemed to go into a strange position and smiled at us creepily. I was so scared, so I aimed my gun at the guy when my flashlight lit up the face of the man. I will never forget what I saw. There was a big X on the middle of his forehead, and the guy was eating a piece of glass, literally eating it and bleeding. We didn't know what to do while we ran back into the house. My brother's friend jumped outside the fence and he didn't come back. We were standing near the window and my brother told me to call Mom and Dad. When I called my mom, I heard a loud smash coming from the big window on the front door. My brother quickly grabbed my shirt and dragged me upstairs. At that moment, I couldn't talk to my mom because then I would make a sound. We stayed silent for about 20 seconds. Then we heard a footstep near my side. I was about to tilt my head to take a look when I suddenly heard a gun get reloaded. My brother quickly punched the guy. I ran so fast downstairs. We had to live. We were almost to the door when we heard a gunshot. We quickly ran to the nearest neighborhood and told someone what happened. We called Mom and Dad and also dialed 911. When the police came to our house, they found fresh blood trails from the living room to the bathroom. There, they found the guy bleeding to death, as if the guy wanted us to watch him commit suicide or possibly kill us. Well, I don't know, but that was some serious madhouse shit, and I would never, ever forget what happened. Black-eyed woman. I was 11 years old at the time. It was a horrible event. I lived in Texas, but my family decided to go to California during the summer of 2015. It wasn't going to be a long time, so my family of 6, including me, stayed at my aunt's house. One night, my parents went to a party, and both of my brothers and I didn't want to go, so we stayed behind. My aunt's daughter stayed with us too. It was around 6 p.m. My parents said they were coming back around 2 a.m. Hearing that gave me goosebumps, since we were staying at a 2-story house. I've always been scared of 2-story houses for this reason. As soon as our parents left, we all decided to eat snacks. Well, we wanted to, but there weren't any. My cousin asked us if we wanted to go to the store with her. Since she was already 19, she could drive by herself. My brother said yes, but I told him, I do want snacks, but I don't want to go. I thought that my brothers would want to stay behind too, since they were just 2 years older than me. But instead, they just said, okay. They all left without me. I was all alone. 15 minutes in, I was sitting on the couch playing on my iPad. Suddenly, I heard a sound coming from upstairs. I decided to check what it was, but as soon as I started to go up the stairs, a glass cup fell down the stairs. I ran to my uncle's room and hid inside the closet. After 2 minutes of hiding, the lights in the room started flashing. I could see it from the crack under the door. I wanted to text my brother, but I left the iPad on the couch. Soon after, I heard another sound from upstairs. Well, that's how I knew that whatever was doing all the scary stuff was definitely upstairs. I decided to run out of the house, and then try to ask the next door neighbors to let me into their house for a bit. But before I could, I checked the upstairs window when I got outside, and I saw a figure in one of the rooms. It was a clear image since it was barely 7 p.m. The figure was definitely the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I saw a woman with a black dress. She was pale and had dark eyes. It was as if she accidentally messed up her makeup and got black makeup all around her eyes. She also looked kind of like a nun. I stood there, watching her for like 10 seconds. And then I saw a car driving in from the side. I moved near the garage and the car came closer. It parked at the house. I realized it was my cousin with both of my brothers. I was relieved. They asked me why I was outside, and I said I wanted to take a picture of the house from outside. I didn't tell them the truth. They didn't realize I didn't have my iPad when I said this. Once we got inside the house, I followed them upstairs. I was obviously behind them since I was scared. Nothing happened the rest of the day until that night. It was 10 p.m. It was raining. I just wanted to see the thunder, so I moved the curtains to look out the window. A bit of light came in because of the lightning. And that's when I saw it again. The figure was in the neighbor's parkway, just staring at the house. I will never forget that night, no matter how hard I try. Sometimes, while I'm having fun, I'll stop and remember, and the thought always ruins my day. The thought that the woman from that night might always be out there looking for me.
This event happened when I was around 13 years old. I was going on a family road trip with my parents and siblings. My brother was 16 at the time and my half-sister was 21. I don't completely remember where we were going or where we stayed since it was almost 15 years ago. All I remember was that we rented a cottage in a small village. Next to the village was a lot of mountains surrounding the perimeter, and there were probably only 20 houses in the village. Next to the cottage was a small lake that was big enough to kayak in, and to the right of the little lake was a small shed. The shed was very old, and its ceiling had been poorly repaired. There was ivy growing all over it. Although this may not seem scary, the door was wide open and the place we were staying at was all fenced off with a really high fence. This probably meant that no one would be able to come into our property. Later that same day, my brother and I decided to check it out since we had nothing else to do other than swim in the lake before dinner. Bear in mind, this happened in the winter, meaning it would get dark much earlier than in the summer. We walked up towards the shed, and as we walked towards it, we realized that a source of light was shining through the ceiling. It didn't seem like it was a normal ceiling light, but was almost like a torch. We saw the light slowly move around in between the cracks of the shed. Then, in one sudden motion, the light randomly pointed at us. My brother and I were petrified by the situation. We both looked at each other with blank expressions. Our parents were in the lounge watching TV, so they wouldn't be able to hear us at all if we cried out for help. I don't like to be cliché, but my big brother is a very strong person, emotionally, physically, and mentally. So I was surprised when I saw his lower lip tremble out of the corner of my eye. I thought he was going to protect me by telling me what to do, but instead he just stood there, frozen. like me, with a petrified face as the bright light blinded us through the gaps between the walls of the shed for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly, the light switched off. A small sense of relief hit me as the light turned off, but I was still scared for my life. Because the light was shining on our faces for so long, our eyes were not used to the dark. When we tried to escape by running in the opposite direction towards the cottage, we couldn't see where we were going. Then, as if the situation couldn't get any worse, we heard a loud shuffling sound coming from the shed. We could hear the sound starting to crescendo as we ran silently towards the cottage. The sound was getting louder and louder. Soon after, I could just make out a hollow voice coming from behind us. I hesitantly looked behind me. To my horror, I saw a middle-aged man standing next to the shed with a flashlight in his hand. His hands were covered in what looked like blood, and his hair was greasy as if he never showered once in his life. He had a long beard that looked tangled and disgusting. In a faint voice, he said, "Come here, child. I have many toys in here. Do you want to play some games with me?" He said this with a creepy smile and eyes wide open without blinking. He looked as if he was talking to me. I instantly screamed as loud as I could, and my brother grabbed my hand with dear life as we sprinted back into the cottage. We told our parents what happened, and I hugged my brother and sister with tearful eyes. They didn't believe us at first because they were so shocked by the situation and so confused. But when they saw the monstrous man's face pressed up against the window with a bloody butcher's knife in his hand, they screamed in horror and immediately called the police. The police were nearby since it was a small town, but as the sirens came, we saw the man run back to his shed, and unfortunately, they never caught him. They asked us what he looked like and what he said to us. The police told us that a girl that looked similar to me and was roughly the same age as me was murdered last month because of that man we saw from the shed. I can't imagine what would have happened if we stayed in a busy town that weekend, or if the police didn't make it in time. I am now scared to go near sheds after that incident, and I will never be the same. A situation like this has not happened since, but I really hope that man is either caught or is being chased by the police, because those few moments scarred me for life. I am a 16-year-old girl. Years ago, in the summer, I left my place in the city to visit my aunt and uncle's house in the suburbs of New Jersey. I mainly went to hang out with my cousin. Let's call her Kate. My cousin and I are 3 years apart. My aunt and uncle both worked in Manhattan. One day, my aunt and uncle decided to attend a party after work. During the day, Kate and I went down to the street to her friend's house because they had a pool. We spent all day swimming. When we walked back to her house, it was around 4 p.m. It was still sunny out. All of a sudden, Kate's phone stopped working. Nothing to worry about. I still had mine and it was brand new. We spent another hour outside and figured it was time to call my aunt to tell her we were okay. On the steps, I pulled my phone out, but it was not working. We took the battery out, put it back in, but still nothing. With no way to call my aunt, we just went inside the house. It was maybe 5 p.m. Kate's older sister, Julie, a high schooler, was spending the night at her friend's house, so we were all alone. In the living room, we put the 2 sofas together as we normally did when I slept over. We were both tired and ready to sleep. We had been left alone like this a lot of times, so it didn't faze us. The house is big and gets pitch black. All of a sudden, we heard a big bang that sounded like brass or metal coming from across the hall. We got up and checked Kate's room. Nothing had fallen. We went back to the living room to sleep. Maybe 2 hours later, we heard another bang coming from the room. We checked again. Nothing had fallen. This time, we were a little unnerved. We went back but stayed up, then shortly heard a bang a third time coming from the same room. We were nervous. We went on opposite sides of the hallway and walked in the room this time like a little SWAT team. Everything was intact. We couldn't sleep after. We stayed up on the sofas and saw a shadow coming from the basement. The basement had no door. It was just open. No one was home yet. We called out for Kate's parents, and if they were home, they would have said something. Their driveway was empty. Their car wasn't there. We were terrified. Kate and I grabbed knives, and we just stayed down on the kitchen floor. Nothing happened. After another hour, we went back to the sofas. We woke up to the sound of a girl screaming, "Help me!" We sprang up and heard someone banging on the door, but we were too petrified because we saw another shadow next to the shadow from earlier. Terrified, we just made sure the door was locked and went back to the sofa. After 30 minutes, we were woken up again, but this time to a police car and ambulance lights coming through from the living room windows. We were exhausted and went back to sleep. Sometime during the early morning, Kate's parents came home. We were sleeping and heard a huge bang coming from Kate's room. This time, my uncle came up from the basement, which is where my aunt and uncle's room was. He was holding one of his metal bats. He was ready to protect us. With my uncle in front of us, we all went into the room. Nothing was on the ground and nothing had fallen. We knew we weren't crazy because even Kate's parents heard it. We never could explain what happened that night. The next morning, both Kate and my phone started working. After that day, I hated going to their house. I believe their house is haunted. Either that or someone was trying to come inside because they knew their car wasn't in the driveway and they thought they could break in.
My name is Jasmine. One night my girlfriend and I were getting ready because we were going to head out for a night of fun. We got in the car and I don't know what got into us, but we were feeling very flirty and decided to park at a parking lot to do our thing. We were in the car doing our thing. I was on her in the driver's seat while she had the seat reclined. When we were moving around, I accidentally honked the horn with my butt. I looked at my girlfriend and told her, "I hope that didn't draw any attention to us." She said, "It's okay. It's like 1 a.m. I doubt anyone is awake." So we continued. I kid you not. 3 minutes later, I put my head up to fix my hair and looked to my right. What I saw made my stomach drop. There was a man on his knees, just watching us. I quickly jumped off my girlfriend into the passenger side, screamed and told her to drive off. As my girlfriend was trying to figure out how to put the seat up, the man got up and put his hands up. I got the most sickening feeling when I saw his hands were covered in blood. My girlfriend quickly locked the car door and got ready to drive off. Then the man told us, "Don't panic." I told my girlfriend to step on it, and when she did, I just remember looking back, seeing his face get all mad and quickly walk away from the area. As we were driving off, I was sitting there asking myself if he murdered someone. Could he be hurt? So my girlfriend decided to drive back to see what the fuck happened. I didn't want to, but I thought maybe he needed help. When my girlfriend and I went back, we saw 2 cop cars pass the area, coming from different directions. We were looking at each other, trying to figure out what was going on. When we drove back into the parking lot, he was gone. I don't know what he needed or why he had blood on his hands, but ever since that night, I always made sure my car door is locked. And now I carry a taser with me.
Well, to begin with, it all started last month. I was leaving school alone. It was a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. As I was leaving, I saw a man in his 50s. He was wearing a black jacket and a pair of ugly old basketball shorts. He looked so gross. After a couple of minutes, I was finally home. I was listening to music the whole time, and I didn't realize that the man was following me. He was even holding a camera towards my bedroom window. I freaked out, but I still tried to stay calm. As I was locking the door, I checked the window and the man was still there holding his camera and smiling. I told my mom, so she called the police, but they didn't find anything. They even asked me to describe him to an artist so that they could have his face, but nothing. I wouldn't tell you this story if it didn't happen just last week. I was finishing a private guitar lesson at my teacher's house when something caught my eye. It was a picture of her and her husband. Then I realized that my stalker was her husband. I took my bag, made up an excuse, apologized, and left the house. She was shocked when she saw me running. Soon after, I opened my bag and almost passed out. There was an envelope full of my pictures of me changing in my bedroom. I immediately called my mom, crying as I explained the situation. She called the police, and after a couple of minutes, they arrived. My mom did as well. They went into my teacher's house, asked her several questions about her husband, and asked about any strange activities. She stayed quiet. After searching the house, they found other pictures of multiple girls. After they caught him, they discovered that he had a bad history, which included rape and sexual assault. Now he is in prison, but I'm still afraid that someone like him will go a step further.
I'm 30 years old, and this story took place when I was 13. My mother was a single mom, and she had to work 2 jobs. She worked at a grocery store in the morning and a bar at night. So I was home alone a lot, but it was okay because I was used to it. I could cook myself some dinner and walk back and forth to school. I was a pretty responsible kid for my age. One night, I was watching TV while eating ice cream, and someone knocked at the front door. I was wondering who it could be, as my friends never came out this late and my mom would always use her key to get in. I opened the door, and it was a man standing there with his hands in his pockets. I said, "Hello?" He replied, "Hello, young lady. Are your parents home?" Stupidly, I said, "No. My mom isn't home right now. You have to come back tomorrow." He then said with a surprised smile on his face, "Oh, you're all alone, huh?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He replied with, "Okay, young lady. Have a nice night. Don't get into any trouble." He then walked away and I closed the door. He seemed friendly, but also weird at the same time. He was a little funny looking though. He was balding and had 70s style glasses on, with a mustache and bags under his eyes like he never slept. About 10 minutes passed, and there was another knock at the door. I got up to answer it, but before I opened the door, something told me to put the chain on. I don't know why, but my gut told me to do that. It was strange because we really didn't use the chain, but I'm glad I did, because as soon as I opened the door, it was pushed open, but abruptly stopped by the chain. Before I could even say or do anything, I looked through the crack of the door to see the same man again, and he said in a startled voice, Oh, hey there. I just wanted to make sure you were okay," as he stuttered. It was like he knew he failed getting inside the house and tried to play off any suspicion by speaking quickly and making it seem like he didn't just obviously try coming into the house, I said, "I'm fine, thanks," and I shut the door. At that time, I didn't really understand the situation or the dangers of what just happened. But still, I was a bit freaked out and wanted my mom to come home soon. An hour went by, and I was still thinking about what happened, so I started to watch a movie, trying to keep my mind occupied, when I heard,
"Hey, let me in quick. I gotta tell you something."
This was the scariest situation I've ever been in my life. It was the man once again. He was talking through the letterbox. I shouted, "Leave me alone." The letterbox closed. Then the man started banging on the front door, screaming, "Let me in, you little shit," while slamming the front door handle up and down trying to get in. I just stood back crying, praying he doesn't get in. He eventually gave up and left. My mom came home about 30 minutes later, just to find me crying, and I told her everything that happened. We told the police, but they never found this guy. I look back, and I think how grateful I am that I had the feeling to put the chain on the door. I hate to think what that man would have done if he had managed to get in. This story just happened last year. I work as a receptionist at a hotel, and we often hold high school proms here as we have a big hall and a stage. In order to get to the hall, you have to pass the reception desk. It was prom night, and it was already underway. All the students and teachers were in the dance hall. All the pictures had been taken, and the reception area was empty. At some point during the evening, someone approached the reception desk. I looked up to see a tall man standing there. He had a clean-shaven face, and his hair was greasy and tied back in a ponytail. He was also wearing a suit that was pretty old, and it was also dirty, along with some Adidas shoes. His eyes were wide open, and he said, "I'm here for the prom." At first, I thought he was kidding, but he looked dead serious. He accidentally said porn, then he said prom. I said, are you employed by the school? He said, no, I'm a student here. I still kept thinking he was joking. He looked to be in his late 40s, and he was telling me he was a high school student. So I asked him, how old are you? He said, I'm 17. No, 16. Yeah, 16. At this point, I thought he was on drugs or something. I said, I'm sorry, but you don't look 16 at all. He just stared at me, not saying a word, with his eyes wide, staring right at me. He then leaned over to me and said, I'll make you a deal. I have a big blade in my pocket. If I'm not 16, you can cut my finger off. If I am 16, I can cut your finger off. I didn't get the chance to say anything because he walked out right after he said that. I told my boss about what happened. He said to let him know if he comes back and he'll deal with it. I finished my shift around 12 and then went to get in my car. There was an envelope under my windshield wiper. Written on it was, "A deal is a deal." I opened the envelope to see a human finger. And I had a feeling that this wasn't his own finger due to it being another color. I never saw that man again, and I always wondered why he was trying to get into that prom.
One day I was showering. My sister came into the bathroom and said, "Don't open the curtains." She said that her friend was going to use the bathroom because she couldn't hold it any longer. I said, okay. I knew someone was there because I heard noises. Then I heard the door close, so I came out of the bathroom. I asked my sister which one of her friends came. She answered, "No one came over. What are you talking about?" I got chills and I started to freak out. About 2 months later, I was sleeping in my parents' room with my mom and dad because I was scared to sleep alone in my own room. I woke up in the middle of the night. I sat down on the bed and then I saw something truly horrifying. I saw a lady in all white standing near the bedroom door, just watching me. I screamed and my parents woke up. They asked me what happened and I pointed at the lady that scared me. They asked me what I was talking about because there was no one there. I pointed toward its direction and said that there's a lady right there. My dad got up to turn on the lights. He walked right through the lady. As soon as he turned on the lights, the lady disappeared. We moved about 3 months later. When we were unpacking, I saw a picture of a lady. She looked familiar. When I remembered where I saw her, I got chills. It was the lady I saw when I woke up in the middle of the night. I asked my dad who was the lady in the picture. He told me she was my grandma. He also told me she died when he was 23 years old. My dad was now at the age of 41 when he told me. I got really scared after that. Now when I wake up in the middle of the night, I try my best to go straight back to sleep. It was April of 2007, and my birthday was approaching. Most of my family had already told me the gifts I would receive, like a new Wii along with video games for it. My grandmother didn't tell me anything. Now, my grandmother had always been a strange woman. She wasn't very talkative, but I liked to hear the stories she told. They were creepy, but intriguing. She told me she was going to give me a book. She didn't show it to me, nor did she tell me what it was about. Once my birthday rolled around, I was opening gifts from my loved ones. When I got to my grandmother's present, I opened it up and I saw a book with a pentagram carved into its front cover. I picked it up and thought nothing of it, because at the time, I didn't know what the shape was or what it meant. As soon as I grabbed it, though, everything went pitch black. When I woke up, my family was surrounding me, and my mom was scolding my grandmother about giving me the book. My grandmother looked at me, but her eyes were evil-looking. That night, when I went to bed, I was having a pretty good dream. But suddenly, something woke me up. I looked around and saw nothing. Then, suddenly, I saw a shadowy figure in the doorway looking at me. This wasn't a case of sleep paralysis because I was able to move, but that didn't comfort me because that meant it was real life. The figure crept closer and closer to me. When I looked closer at the figure, I saw gray hair and crooked teeth. That's when I knew it was my grandmother. I screamed and ran past her, but she grabbed me and tossed me back. I noticed she had something in her hand, but I couldn't tell what it was. I saw one of my toys that I had gotten a few years ago, picked it up and threw it at her. She fell to the ground and I ran past her, telling my parents. My parents called the police and they got there and arrested her. The thing she had in her hand was a knife, and she was planning on killing me. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if that toy wasn't lying there.
People call me Yaya. This happened to me when I was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8. It was a Saturday afternoon and my mother and I were at a mall shopping. We went from store to store, mostly for me. I was a spoiled kid. We went into a coat store, and I was pretty bored, so I would constantly walk away from my mother to play and stuff as I did in every other store. My mother would always call my name and I'd go running to her. This time, I was playing in a round coat rack. My mother called my name and I ran out. I ran right into this older man. Then he grabbed me. He grabbed me by my wrist and asked me why I was running. I told him because I have to get to my mom. He then told me he could take me to her, but I said no, and he let go. It was weird because I saw this man in almost every store he went to, but he never had any bags. After that store, I had to use the bathroom really bad, so I went while my mother went to the food court. I sat down to use it for maybe a minute when someone else came in. The person walked right up to my stall. At this point, I was just looking at the person's shoes. They were men's shoes. I was confused of why a man would be in here. Before I could look up, the man said, "Hey, Yaya, everything okay in there? I'll come in if you want me to." It was the man from the stores. I looked up, and I could see his eyes peeking through the crack of the door. He then started shaking the stall. I began to scream. I've never been so afraid in my life. Then 2 women walked into the bathroom, and the man took off. These women took me to my mother and told the police. They found him due to the cameras. I don't know what his intentions were, but the police said he probably would have kidnapped me. Who knows? From that time on, I would never leave my parents' side while in public.
We used to have a maid from Indonesia, and her name is Wati. Well, one night it was probably around 2 a.m. Everyone was sleeping. Suddenly, my brother and I heard my maid weeping. She was crying softly. We thought she probably missed her family in Indonesia, so we just ignored her and went back to sleep. The next day, at the same time, around 2 a.m., she was weeping again. This went on and on for 3 months. And we told our parents about it, and everyone had the same thought. She probably missed her family back home. One night at 9 p.m., my brothers and I were chilling in the living room. My maid was in the kitchen washing dishes. My dad was fixing the kitchen light, and suddenly my dad saw a shadow running around in the storage room. My dad thought it was one of us playing around, so my dad called out to my brother, "Can you please get the light bulb from the drawer?" But no one answered. Then my dad shouted, "Hey, Can someone help me out and get the light bulb for me?" Both of us ran towards my dad from the living room, which is on the opposite side of the storage room. My dad then got confused and asked us why we came from the living room. We got goosebumps and walked into the storage room. We switched the lights on and saw that there was no one there. However, we saw the maid shaking. She looked at us, then started weeping again. My dad asked, "Who was that and why are you weeping?" My maid then explained that it was her guardian from Indonesia. My dad asked her to call him out and he was going to call the police. But my maid stated that it was not a human, but a spirit that was summoned to protect her. After that, my dad brought us to a nearby hotel for the night and hired a spiritual hunter to chase the spirit away. Following that incident, we no longer heard the maid weeping, and she was sent back to Indonesia 3 days after the incident. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, I experienced something that I can't really explain. I just came home from school one day and I decided I would play with my toy cars. When I opened the door to my room, I saw that all my cars were disorganized. I freaked out. I have OCD, and so that's why I freaked out. I then accused my mom of messing with my toys, but she swore she never touched them. I let it go. That night, I was asleep, and my dad was still up. He saw a kid go into the bathroom, and he thought it was me. He yelled, "Go back to bed!" And my mom thought he was crazy, especially since I was fully asleep. When my parents went to my room to check on me, I was knocked out on my bed. My dad went to sleep, and my mom did too. The next day, however, my mom had a creepy experience. She was walking down the hall with my laundry, and she was knocked over by someone. The crazy part is, I was in school, and my dad was at work. She was supposed to be alone in the house. She picked up the laundry that fell and placed them on my bed. After she left my room, however, she saw a picture lying on the floor. She picked it up and then fainted. I came home and saw her passed out on the floor. I got scared because I thought my mom was dead. She woke up only to start crying. She told me that she saw my baby cousin. I said, "So what?" But then she said, "Son, your cousin is dead." Turns out he was killed in an accident before I was born. Nothing else has happened since that day, but I'm convinced that those experiences won't be the last. This happened when I was much younger. My brother was on the soccer team. Let's call him Sean. My family went to his soccer match, which was at a local park. This park included a huge soccer field and a playground area. I was getting bored of watching the game and went over to the playground, where I spotted this kid who had a Spider-Man web shooter on his wrist. Being a big fan of Spider-Man, I walked up to him. I asked him if it was the silly string shooting toy, and he nodded. Then he said, "I have another one in my family's car. I'll show you." So he led me over to his van that was parked in the parking lot nearby. He began to crawl in. His father was in the front seat. He gave me a weird, creepy grin, but I still started to climb into the van. Out of nowhere, I heard my father shouting my name. I was pushed out by the kid and he slammed the van door shut. The van sped off and my dad ran towards me and hugged me. After that, my family and my brother left the game. If my father didn't notice I had left the playground or was a minute late, I don't know where I'd be right now. I just want to tell any parent who is either reading or listening to this, please, drill "don't follow strangers" into your kid's head. When I was 4 years old, my family and I used to live in a huge apartment. Along with the apartment complex was a huge basement where we could do our laundry. However, in order to get there, we had to take the elevator. One day, my mom was doing the laundry. My brothers and I accompanied her. My two brothers were playing together. Meanwhile, I was wandering off to the dark basement's hallway. As I walked in further, I saw bloody footprints that were the same size as my feet. I followed the footsteps, and they suddenly stopped at the end of the hallway. I looked up and I saw two kids, a boy with brown hair and brown eyes and a girl with blonde hair and brown eyes. They were both my age. There was something odd about them, but like any other 5-year-old, I just ignored it. I turned my head around to see if there was anyone else in the hallway, but there wasn't. As I turned my head around to look at the kids again, they vanished. I was confused. I mean, how could that be possible? There was only a wall in front of me. A few days later, I was getting into the elevator. As soon as I entered, I saw the kids again. I asked them where their mom and dad were, but they didn't respond. I turned around and I pressed the button to go to the 3rd floor, and as I turned back to them, again, they were gone. I was shocked. So I told the janitor about what happened. Apparently, there was a horrible situation some time ago. A family used to live here, and the parents killed their own children. Now their ghosts haunt the whole complex in search for their bodies. Several years have passed, and we moved out. But I still wonder if they ever ended up finding their bodies. I'm 21 years old now. This happened to my uncle when I was around 9 years old. My uncle was living in our house and was staying at our vacant guest room up on the 2nd floor. He's my dad's cousin, so he was really close to our family. My uncle was a morning person. He would always get up at around 4 a.m., drink coffee, and run morning errands around the house. He also told us that he could see and feel ghosts because he has a third eye. And to give you a little background on our house, it was the very first house that was built on our street. We could sometimes feel something moving around our house, especially at night, but we never really paid attention to it. One morning, my uncle woke up at his usual time, around 4 a.m. He left his room, which was right beside the staircase, saw my older sister, who was 17 years old at that time, going up the stairs with a cup of coffee in her hand. The weird thing was, he said that my sister was looking down and not showing her face the whole time. He greeted her with, "Good morning, and why are you up so early?" He said my sister just kept walking up while looking down and ignoring him. My uncle felt awkward as my sister just walked past him. He ignored it, thinking my sister was in a really bad mood. He thought she probably stayed up late studying or something. My uncle went down to grab a cup of coffee when he saw my mother in the living room, ironing some clothes. My uncle was confused about why my mother was up at 4 a.m. and ironing clothes. He tried to talk to her and asked the same thing he asked my sister. "Why are you up so early?" He noticed that my mother was wearing the same clothes from the night before she went to bed, so he knew it was her. To his surprise, my mother ignored him. My mother never ignored anyone, which is why he found it strange. My mother was just looking down as she kept ironing. That's when my uncle knew something was off. He knew something was very wrong here. He rushed back upstairs to his room, locked the door, turned off the lights, and tried to go back to sleep. He tried to forget about it and woke up again a few hours later. It was around 10 a.m. in the morning when he talked to my mother and my sister about what happened. They said they were asleep the whole night, and they don't recall waking up at 4 a.m. My uncle was so shocked about what he had just experienced. Someone was copying my mother and sister earlier that morning. I was so scared at that time. I became so paranoid that I might feel or see something odd in our house, but I tried not to think about it too much. The night after that situation, my uncle woke up at around 3 a.m. He felt something at the end of his bed, and he saw a woman with long hair sitting there. My uncle froze for a while. He didn't know what to do. He was trembling when he said, "Go away!" My uncle hid under his blankets. After a few minutes, which felt like hours, he looked at the same spot where he saw the woman, and she was gone. My uncle slept with the lights on that night. After that experience, he thankfully didn't experience anything like it ever again. When I was 8 years old, I used to live in my grandma's house in Ecuador. Many of the neighbors would talk to my parents about seeing weird stuff in the house, like shadows moving around the windows when we weren't home. The first thing that would come to our heads was that someone must have broken into the house, but nothing would ever be missing. Of course, they didn't think that there was someone breaking in. They were sure that our house was haunted. Everyone even refused to come inside for parties or any other special occasion. They told us to get a priest and to get rid of any bad spirits. We didn't take their warnings as something important because my parents don't believe in those kinds of things. Although I would hear someone going up spiral horns, and his eyes shined in the dark. I still couldn't move. The thing ran by me, looked at me, but it didn't do anything to me. It just looked at me. It could have been a goat or a sheep. I've never seen one so big or one that walks on two legs like a human. It ran, and I hid behind a big tree by my neighbor's house. Finally, I could move. I yelled at the top of my lungs while crying hysterically. My dad came running with his shotgun in hand and asked me what was wrong. I explained what I saw to him, but he didn't believe me, nor did my mom. But someone did. My neighbor told me that he thought nothing happened to me because I'm a kid. As time passed, I slowly got over it. I moved from that house and moved to New York. My grandparents sold the house, and I left that experience in the past. However, that's not where this story ends. In my sophomore year in high school, I had a nightmare. The thing that I saw that night was in it this time. I could only see its head as it was hiding behind the big tree. He said 3 words that'll haunt me until my time comes. It said, "You can't hide." I woke up from my nightmare and headed to school. While in school, at around 12:30 p.m., there was an announcement. A classmate of mine had been killed in front of my school by a car without brakes. I turned pale as I thought my nightmare may have something to do with the incident. I was scared and even went home early. I told my parents about it, but this time they took me to a priest and he said he'd give me something in 3 days. Every single day I had the same nightmare until my priest gave me a blessed cross, and I haven't had any nightmares about the thing anymore. However, every night I sleep with the covers over my head. Call me a coward or anything you want, but the thing still hasn't left my mind. Those 3 words haunt me till this day, making me wonder when I will forget or move on from the thing.
About 10 to 12 years ago, I was a drug addict living in Cleveland, Ohio. I usually spent my days smoking, drinking, and I was usually up to no good. I would go with whoever had the drugs, basically. One day, my friend and I were talking with this guy, and he said he had some dope on him, and he invited us to his house. It wasn't the first time I've seen him invite women over to his house to smoke and do other drugs. He seemed nice, but I didn't feel comfortable going with him, but I was. Then I saw another friend across the street, so I went over there to her. After that, I went home, and my friend went with him. The next day, his house was surrounded by police and news cameras. I didn't know why, but my friend ended up telling me that when they were in his house, this guy, Anthony, punched her in the back of her head and started to choke her. Then she woke up in a bed. She said next to the bed, she saw a woman's body with no head attached, but she decided not to scream because he was asleep right next to her. She ended up crawling and getting out of the house, literally running out of the house, barely clothed, and ended up calling the police. Eventually, they found 11 bodies of 11 different women in and around his house. Who would have known that man was a serial killer? His name was Anthony Sowell. I'm so glad that my other friend caught my attention right before I was going to his house. Who knows? I could have been one of those bodies.
A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45, but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened her door and I got a quick peek. Her walks all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting in no light at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next day, I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there.
You should lock your door at night,
she says and walks out. The next morning, I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor, talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand, with her rotting, dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside, and I can smell death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well, while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him, holding a power drill. At this stage, I'm basically shitting myself. I call the cops, and they know all about her. Apparently, she's a violent schizophrenic, and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days, waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution. And in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I never see her again, but I still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep.
where her secret hiding place was. Finally, she came out of the room, which meant she finished hiding it.
friend. Later on, when I was looking at the man who was shot, I looked him up on social media and realized that he and Callum added each other on Facebook. Upon further investigation, I realized that there were thousands of messages sent between the two where Callum revealed sensitive information about several operations. I knew that he killed this man on purpose, but I had no way of proving it. He was taken to court and was sentenced to 3 years in jail for perverting the court of justice. I testified against him and was no longer his friend. When I was 24 years old, I was still on the firearms team. All that happened with Callum was behind me, and I was happy with my life. One night I went home really late after work. As I walked to my apartment, I realized that it was trashed. I called the police and they reported it, but there was not much they could do because I didn't have a CCTV. As I got into bed, I saw that there was a note on my bedside table. All it said was, "Remember me?" I instantly recognized Callum's handwriting. And now that he was out of prison, I thought that he would move on with his life. I was so wrong. This was his revenge. The next day, I went to the underground parking lot and I saw that my windscreen was smashed. It was clear that he wasn't over me testifying against him. Soon after, I also saw him near my apartment. I ran after him, but he ignored me and ran away. I tried calling his old number, but it was no longer in service. Then an envelope was sent through my door, and it contained hundreds of photos of me at work, home, and even out with my girlfriend at clubs and restaurants. These were all taken very recently. The last one, though, was a picture of Callum and I from years ago, and on the other side, written with a big red marker, were the words, "You're dead." I reported this as stalking and hoped he would end up back in prison. The police had gone to his listed address, but there was no one there. In fact, all of his bags were packed. I knew he was still in the area somewhere, though. One day I was by myself in an unmarked car, and I saw this Toyota Yaris, and it was driving close behind me. It was my gut instinct to get the plate number checked, and I was going to. But then I got a Priority 1 announcement on the radio saying there was a crazy man on a bus who had a knife and stabbed someone. I turned on my sirens and blue lights and headed to the accident. As I got on the bus, he was already arrested, and the ambulance was already there as well. As I was about to leave the bus, I heard a loud bang, and a man on the bus fell down. He was shot through the window by a man who was wearing a black hoodie. He immediately ran. I ran out of the bus and went to the boot of my car. I got my MP5 SF out, which was a large rifle with sniper capabilities. I ran after the suspect and radioed in. They gave me an order of critical shot, which meant I could shoot to kill the suspect. He ran through the town center and went to the left. I was worried about public safety as he had a large rifle as well. I realized instead of running after him, I needed to get on a roof and shoot down. I went to this building that had views of the right and left. It took me 5 minutes, and I was worried that he would have run away by now. As I got to the roof, I turned my gun to the sniper level. I used the eyepiece to scan, and I saw a man in a black hoodie running. I fired a shot, and he fell to the ground. By the time I got there, more armed policemen came to the area. I was shocked to see Callum. He was the one who followed me in the car behind me, and that shot in the bus was meant for me. But he missed. Callum was dead. I felt sad, but also relieved that this was all over. The man shot in the bus survived, and I was promoted for my diligent work. I'm still working in the force.
This happened to me in 1970s. To be exact, it was November 23rd, 1971. I was 20 years old at the time and was really down on my luck. I was living in Portland, but I'm from Seattle, and I'll be going home very soon. I had lost my job and was about to be evicted from my apartment because I couldn't pay the rent. I will be flying back home to stay with my parents until I could find a new job or somehow get the money for my apartment, which would be very unlikely. I had one night left in my apartment before leaving. I didn't feel like staying home, so I decided to go for a walk and have a drink in a bar. On my way to the bar, I stopped at a convenience store and purchased a lottery ticket. I walked down the street and entered a nearby bar, where I ordered myself a beer. Not long after that, a man came inside and sat next to me and ordered a drink. We got to talking about life and just general conversation when he mentioned he was going to a flight the next day to Seattle. I laughed and asked him, "Wait, flight 305? He laughed and said, "Yeah, that's the one." He asked me why I was heading there. I told him I had money troubles, and coincidentally, he said the same thing. He seemed like a nice guy. We talked for about another hour before he decided to call it a night. Unfortunately, I never caught his name. I was about to leave the bar myself shortly after that when I heard over the TV that the lottery numbers would be announced. I decided to stay and check if I had won. Why not? And would you believe it? I won $15,000. Of course, I was beyond belief with shock. And of course, I wouldn't need to go back home because I had money now. The next day, I saw something on the news that a flight had been hijacked and the plane was being held at ransom. It was the same flight I was going to be on. And I couldn't believe it, but the sketch of the guy they described who took the flight hostage was the exact same man I had been talking to in the bar. He used the name D.B. Cooper. If you didn't know, he threatened to explode the plane with a bomb unless he got $200,000, which he did, then jumped out of the plane with the money and parachute and was never seen again. I didn't know why, but I never said anything to anyone. Even if I could, it's not like I knew his real name. It was such a scary coincidence that the only thing that stopped me was the reason why I was in that predicament anyway. I needed money, and then I got some. It's strange how everything works out in life.